The moment you move on, you think women go crazy when you move on because they loved you too much. But the truth is harder than that and way more empowering. You think it's about jealousy or regret, or them suddenly realizing your value when you're gone. You think it's about you becoming scarce. You think it's some emotional glitch in them. But listen carefully. What actually happens when you move on has almost nothing to do with chasing you and everything to do with losing control over who you are. Before we go any further, subscribe to this channel. Not for me, for you. Because the truth you're about to hear isn't comfortable. And when things get uncomfortable, people forget. They go back to old habits. You need reminders like this. If why your silence hits harder than words, you're serious about respect, clarity, and building a life that doesn't beg for approval, subscribe now. Let's get into it. Here's what it really means when women go crazy after you move on. It means the story they told themselves about you just broke. Most men misunderstand this from the start. They think the goal is to make her miss them. They think absence is a tactic. They think if they disappear just long enough, she'll come running back. Emotional, desperate, finally seeing their worth. That's the fantasy. That's the movie version. That's the lie. The hard truth is this: when you move on for real, you stop participating in her emotional narrative. And that loss of narrative control is what creates the reaction. Let's break this down. The misconception is that her reaction is love. It's not. Love doesn't panic when control disappears. Attachment does. Ego does. Identity does. Here's the hard truth. When you were with her, you played a role. Maybe you were the provider of attention. Maybe you were the emotional anchor. Maybe you were the safe option. Maybe you were the one she could rely on to always be there, always respond, always explain yourself, always try harder when things felt uncertain. You were predictable. And predictability is comfortable. Predictability creates leverage. Predictability allows someone else to organize their emotions around your presence. When you move on, that predictability dies. And here's why that matters. Human beings don't just fall in love with people. They fall in love with the way people make them feel about themselves. They fall in love with the role someone plays in their inner world. They fall in love with the certainty that someone will stay in place. So when you move on, not temporarily, not as a tactic, but when you actually detach, something deeper happens. You stop validating her version of reality. You stop being available as an emotional reference point. You stop confirming the story that says, I can leave and he'll still be there. You stop explaining. You stop chasing. You stop trying to be understood. You stop trying to be chosen. And that's when the reaction comes, not because she suddenly wants you back, but because her identity just lost a stabilizer. That's emotional disorientation. When you were there, even in conflict, even in distance, you were still part of her emotional ecosystem. You were a known variable. She could predict you. She could test boundaries. She could pull away and feel you lean in. She could doubt you and watch you prove yourself again. That dynamic fed something. When you move on, you don't just remove attention, you remove access. And access is power. Here's the part no one tells you. Most of the emotional reactions you see after you move on are not about you being special. They're about you no longer being usable. Let that sink in. Usable doesn't mean malicious. It means functional. It means you served a role in her emotional regulation. And when that role disappears without negotiation, permission, or closure, it creates internal chaos. Now she has to face herself without you. And that costs her certainty, validation, leverage, and the option to come back whenever she feels like it. And people don't like losing options. This is why the reaction often looks irrational. One day she's cold, detached, indifferent. The next day she's curious, emotional, angry, nostalgic, reaching out, posting things, asking about you. That's not love awakening, that's control withdrawing. Here's the reframe you need. When you move on the right way, you're not trying to trigger anything. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not trying to win. You're reclaiming your position as the author of your own life. And that destabilizes people who were used to writing you into their script. Now, let's talk about why this hits differently. This isn't about superiority, it's about emotional dynamics. Many people are deeply attuned to emotional patterns. They track shifts. They build internal maps of relationships. When you are in her life, you fit into that map. When you move on, you don't just leave it, you invalidate it. You show that her understanding of you was incomplete, and that creates discomfort. Discomfort seeks resolution. Some try to resolve it by pulling you back in through emotion, conflict, nostalgia, or drama, because any reaction feels better than no access. Silence, real silence, can't be negotiated. Presence feeds fantasy. Silence forces reality. And reality is this: you don't need her reaction to validate your decision, but most men never get there. If you move on hoping for a reaction, you're still tied to her approval. If you stay half attached, watching, waiting, analyzing, you haven't moved on. You've just changed the form of dependence. That keeps you stuck. The real shift is this: the man who truly moves on doesn't announce it, he doesn't threaten. He doesn't use silence as a weapon. He decides quietly. He looks at his life and asks, is this aligned with who I'm becoming? If the answer is no, he moves, practically. He fills his days with purpose, work, discipline, and growth. He stops negotiating his worth. He doesn't need closure or validation. He simply walks away with self-respect. And when this man moves on, people feel it. Not because he's cold, but because he's complete. His boundaries are clear. His energy is calm. His direction is obvious. That kind of grounded presence exposes instability in others, naturally. The goal is not to make anyone go crazy. The goal is to become the kind of man whose absence is felt because his presence was real, not performative. If you were only valuable because you were available, your absence creates annoyance. If you were valuable because of standards, direction, and self-respect, your absence creates reflection. And that reflection is what people mislabel as going crazy. So here's what you do, not as a tactic, but as a reset. You stop chasing explanations. You stop reopening closed doors. You stop replying out of guilt. You stop being emotionally on call. You build a life that doesn't depend on anyone staying. You create routines, discipline, and direction. You separate your self-worth from someone else's behavior. You let silence do its work, not because it's powerful, but because you're no longer afraid of being alone. That's the shift. And when you live like this, your energy changes. You stop trying to be chosen, you choose. Some people will react, some will come back, some will try to pull you into old patterns. That's not your problem. Your responsibility is to stay aligned. And when you do, something powerful happens. You stop needing answers from the past. You stop overthinking. You stop reacting. Your life moves forward. That's real power. Not control, not manipulation. Self-direction. So if you're here to learn how to trigger reactions, you're missing the point. But if you're here because you're tired of being reactive, tired of chasing validation, tired of tying your confidence to someone else's mood, then you're exactly where you need to be. This isn't about women. This is about you becoming someone who stands strong, even alone. You are the answer you've been waiting for. And if you want more truth like this, no fluff, no fantasy, just clarity, subscribe now. This isn't for everyone. It's for people who want to build real strength, real self-respect, and real growth. Stay sharp, stay grounded, and keep moving forward.